Last week, I started talking about hospitality and how important it is in connecting the dots as Christians to a culture that is at best ambivalent and at worst often hostile to Christ and Christianity. And how hospitality has this way of just kind of breaking down barriers and building bridges. And today I want to begin by talking a little bit about Jesus and how he used meals and gatherings as a platform for some of his best ministry. In Matthew 9, we read, as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," he told him, and Matthew got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. In Matthew 11, we see that this led to Jesus having somewhat of a reputation, these types of gatherings. And he said, "The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, 'Here's a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners.'" In Luke 19, we read, when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. You say, well, it looks like Jesus is actually the one receiving hospitality in these instances. And that's correct. However, Jesus drove each and every one of these encounters. His status as a great teacher and prophet meant that people treated Jesus with honor and deference. And so if Jesus invited himself to your house, the honor was yours and you gladly complied. Furthermore, we know that Jesus had no permanent home himself, for the Son of Man, he says, has nowhere to lay his head. And so we find that Jesus was in the habit of making it a regular practice to commandeer people's homes in order to host these wonderful gatherings where acceptance and peace and grace flowed as freely as the food and drink and laughter. In fact, can you even imagine the scriptures without Jesus opening his life in these instances to tax collectors and prostitutes and sinners? I dare say that it would change the essential nature of how we view him. Because he is, after all, the friend of sinners, and where would any of us be without that? Furthermore, we see hospitality practiced in other ways in the ministry of Christ. There's the feeding of the 5,000, the feeding of the 4,000. The turning water into wine at the wedding feast of Cana in Galilee. The washing the feet of his disciples. All of these were intentional acts of hospitality and would have been interpreted as such in that culture. Furthermore, there is a hospitality expressed in the teachings of Christ that even go far beyond what he practiced in his earthly ministry. In John chapter 14, we read, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, so that you also may be where I am. You know the place where I am going." In Matthew 22, Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. Then he sent some more servants and said, 'Tell those who have been invited that I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fatted cattle have been butchered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.'" And so we see the language of hospitality. And finally, is not the Lord's Supper that we celebrate as a congregation and as the people of God, is that not also an invitation for divine hospitality? And so we see that in the ministry of Jesus, that it is a ministry that was and even still is rich in hospitality. And as his people should we not then also be a people who are rich in hospitality? And hospitality is more than a simple invitation to home and hearth. It is a vehicle to express God's peace and acceptance and love and mercy and grace. And hopefully we get that. And still we ask, well, what exactly does that mean, though? What does that look like in our lives? Because I think we instinctively know that hospitality is more than just mechanically inviting someone over for a meal once in a while. I think we instinctively know that it's an attitude, that it's a lifestyle. It certainly was for Jesus. And I believe that attitude and that lifestyle ought to be true for us as well. I want to profile hospitality this morning actually in the life of Abraham. He was an individual who understood these concepts, and more importantly, he understood these concepts in the context of his relationship with God and his mission and the challenge and charge that God had given him to be a light to the nations. And Abraham was reputed to be a person of great hospitality. His hospitality is legendary and it is well-deserved. And so let's take a look at the first 14 verses of Genesis chapter 18. And they read like this. The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. He said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under this tree. Let me get you something to eat so that you can be refreshed and then go on your way, now that you have come to your servant." "Very well," they answered. "Do as you say." So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. "Quick," he said. "Get 3 seahs of fine flour and knead it and bake some bread." And then he ran to the herd and selected a choice and tender calf and gave it to a servant who prepared it. And then he brought some curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them. And while they ate, he stood near them under a tree. "Where's your wife Sarah?" they asked him. "There in the tent," he said. Then the Lord said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son." Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already old and well advanced in years, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, "After I'm worn out and my master is old, will I now have this pleasure?" Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Will I really have a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord?' I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." The first thing that we see in this passage is that hospitality was a priority for Abraham. From the moment he sees these 3 strangers standing off to the side or off at a distance, his number one priority becomes making them feel at home and caring for their needs. He didn't think twice. He saw it as part of his responsibility as a man of God. And Jewish legend magnifies the role of hospitality in Abraham's life. And they believe this hospitality validates Abraham as a man of God. I want to read to you some of that Jewish tradition that has kind of come down, because I believe that it really puts Abraham in context and and kind of gives us a very interesting portrait of how he's viewed in the Jewish community and why he is viewed that way and why he is considered such a man of God. One rabbi writes, Beersheba was like a garden in the desert. All around it, as far as the eye could see, there were barren hills or sandy wastes. No wonder the green, tall palm trees of Beersheba were a welcome sight to all the wayfarers. They knew that in Beersheba there dwelt a wonderful old couple, Abraham and Sarah. This couple had built a huge house with entrances on all four sides. No matter from what direction the wayfarer came, a large sign with welcome on it greeted him. Around the house, Abraham had planted a wonderful garden in which grew the most delicious fruits and berries. Most wonderful of all was a magnificent palm tree in the center of the garden. The tree seemed to know every stranger that came to sit under its branches. If the wayfarer was an honest and God-fearing man, the palm tree would spread forth its branches to shield the visitor from the sun or wind. But if it was an idol worshiper, the palm tree would lift up its branches and offer no protection. Abraham was always busy with his many visitors. Whenever he saw the palm tree behave in an unfriendly way towards a visitor, he would go up to the man and show him special kindness. He would tell him about God, the creator of the world, and how silly it was to worship idols of wood or stone. Before long, the palm tree would spread forth its branches to give shelter to the man, for the idol worshiper was now a changed man. Sarah was as kind and as generous as Abraham. She would take care of the women visitors. At night, when everyone else was fast asleep, there was still a candle burning in Sarah's tent. She was making dresses and things for the poor and needy. God sent a cloud of light over her tent to make it light and bright in her tent. From far and near, men and women came to Beersheba to seek help, advice, and comfort. Weary and sorrowful they came, happy and cheerful they left. And when they wanted to thank Abraham and Sarah for their kindness, they were told to thank God instead. But where is this God? The astonished visitors would ask. His glory fills the heaven and earth, was the reply. And away went the strangers, blessing the God of Abraham and Sarah. Now, I know this story isn't biblically accurate, but it is part of Jewish tradition. A tradition that remembers Abraham and Sarah as people of wonderful hospitality. And that hospitality is a sign of their vibrant and special relationship that they had with God. Furthermore, as we read on in Genesis chapter 18 and then into Genesis 19, we see these concepts validated over and over again. You see, after they shared their meal with the three strangers, two of the strangers took their leave after they had been refreshed, and they went down into Sodom where Lot lived. This was Abraham's nephew, and Lot emulated his uncle, and he demonstrated tremendous hospitality. In fact, I would say even courageous hospitality to these two strangers that came to visit him. And most of us know this story because the community was so wicked that at night they surrounded Lot's house. And they demanded that Lot send out the two visitors that they might violate them. And Lot's concept of hospitality was so strong that his compulsion to protect his guests was so strong that he offered his daughters instead. Now, we find that absurd today, that anyone would do anything like that. And we think to ourselves, how strange this is and how terrible this is. But the point of the text is that Lot desired to care for his guests and protect them and watch over them to the exclusion of even his own family. This type of hospitality is unknown in our culture. However, This type of hospitality continues to endure down throughout the centuries and millennia, even to this day, in many Eastern and Middle Eastern cultures. In his book, Lone Survivor, which was made into a blockbuster movie, a Navy SEAL by the name of Marcus Luttrell writes a story of courageous hospitality. He was injured by a rocket grenade, and his company was dead, and he was the only one, and he was being hunted by Al-Qaeda assassins. He crawled 7 miles through the mountains until he was discovered by some people from a Pashtun tribe. And these people protected Luttrell at the risk of even their own lives, and they brought him back to their village. And once in their village, they were bound by a strict and non-negotiable code of hospitality. And he writes in his book, he said, they would have defended me until the last one was dead from the Taliban killers, if that's what it called for. Guys, we don't have this concept of hospitality in our culture. In fact, the concept of hospitality in our culture is beginning to wane a little bit. In fact, there was an award-winning commercial that debuted last year during the Super Bowl that concedes this point. It was a Chinet commercial. And the copy read like this: "Welcome to the Lost Art Exhibit." And there were people behind glass having a barbecue or playing frisbee or hanging out and having community with one another. It said, "Welcome to the Lost Art Exhibit. There was a time when being social drove people to houses, not home pages. Doorbells rang more frequently than cell phones. Entire neighborhoods found the time to be more neighborly. Occasionally, someone still finds their way back." Guys, this is great stuff. I believe this commercial realizes how deep down, how disconnected we are. And we don't like it. In fact, as Christians, we ought to like it even less, because if we are disconnected, how can we then be salt and light? I believe that one of the things Abraham is showing us, I believe Jesus shows us, is that, one of the first steps to reconnecting is hospitality. Hospitality was important in the life of Abraham. It was important in the life of Jesus, and it ought to be important in our lives as well. But there's more. I think we need to kind of fill out our understanding of hospitality a little bit. Because yes, Jesus and Abraham, viewed hospitality as a priority. They also viewed it as a posture. And I alluded to that a little bit earlier with Jesus, that with him it was a definite attitude, that it was a lifestyle. And let me see if I can explain that a little bit. Hospitality is one of those concepts and one of those words that has no synonyms. It stands alone. It means what it means. And yet, within the idea of hospitality are many other very wonderful and very powerful concepts, like acceptance and inclusion and peace and grace and mercy and service and selflessness and sharing and even sacrifice. It is the idea that my home and my resources and the sum total of who I am were given to me to minister to other people in a way that brings refreshment and encouragement and connection. It is the idea that I am opening my life to others, that they might see me and hopefully see God and experience God through me and through my life and through my hospitality. And Abraham was one who certainly understood this. We see this because as soon as he sees the 3 strangers, Abraham jumps into full service mode, man. I mean, he sees them and he runs out to them. And the language in the text is it's a sprint. He goes out to these strangers. And he bows down before them, and the context is he bows to them as a servant would bow down to them. And believe me, this context, this gesture was not lost on those that he was bowing down to. And he then refers to them as my Lord, lowercase l, which indicates that he didn't know who they were at first. He did not know that it was the Lord and that these were two angels. He thought they were just three strangers, three men at this particular time. And then he's like, come and sit in the shade of my tree. You must be tired and weary and hot from your long journey. Allow me to refresh you. Here, let's bring some water and allow me to wash your feet. Sarah, break out the fine china. Break out our best food. You, the servant over there, go and kill the fatted calf, the one that I have been saving for a special occasion, for this is a special occasion. Because these three new friends have come to share our hospitality with us. Hospitality is the art of making people feel welcome and wanted and special and important and safe and included. And so hospitality can be practiced in your home, but it doesn't have to be practiced in your home. Again, hospitality is a posture. It's a lifestyle. It's an attitude. You can practice hospitality at your workplace or in your church. In fact, what better place to practice hospitality than in your church? It can take place in your neighborhood. You can practice hospitality anywhere. People need to feel welcome, accepted, and included. I read a wonderful story, and I just have to share it here. And I wanted to share it because it's hospitality that does not take place in a home and really illustrates how it is an attitude and how it is a lifestyle. A pastor named Peter Lohman writes about an incredible experience he had with his youth group. He writes, several years ago when I lived in San Antonio, the junior high kids from our church were on an outing to the local laser tag facility. When the kids arrived, they were told that they were being bumped by a group of VIPs who had come to the facility just before them, and so they had to wait an hour for their turn to play, even though they had a reservation. The VIPs were none other than some of the members of the San Antonio Spurs basketball team. Our kids looked on greatly disappointed as the basketball players had their fun. Then suddenly, one of the Spurs stopped cold as he noticed the kids sadly looking on. He left the game and came out to talk to the kids. The next thing you know, these junior high kids were playing laser tag against NBA players. How cool is that? These men couldn't bear to have fun while kids looked on out of the game. It was a lesson in hospitality that our kids would never forget. These men were champions, world champions, at the top of their game and could expect special treatment wherever they went. But they weren't so special that they couldn't set aside time to play a game of laser tag with kids they didn't even know. Those NBA guys had it right. And that's what hospitality looks like. God has given me what I have to share in His work, to share with others. That I am never too busy to make someone else feel welcome or important or special or safe or included. Yes, hospitality is inviting a friend, a neighbor, a coworker, a fellow church member into my home for a meal. That's definitely part of hospitality and maybe one of the easiest ones to practice. But hospitality is also kind and welcoming words to that new person in your neighborhood, to that new person in your office, to the new person in your church. Hospitality is making outsiders feel like insiders. You know, that person who's on the outside looking in and allowing them to feel special and wanted. It is a card or a call or an email or what have you to let someone know that you are thinking of them and you care about them and again that they are wanted and special. It's an invitation to a ball game, a barbecue, a party, a lunch, a lake house, a movie, a gathering after work, a softball team, a bike ride, a festival, or just lemonade on the porch. I believe that both Jesus and Abraham had this attitude. And it's an attitude that we as the people of God ought to emulate. And so, Jesus and Abraham viewed hospitality as a priority. They viewed it as a posture. But I also believe they viewed it as an opportunity. And follow me here. After they had shared their meal, and after everyone was refreshed, notice that the conversation turned towards spiritual things. As such conversations, honestly, are apt to do. As you draw closer to people around a table and shared bread, it's so easy and natural to begin talking about deeper things and spiritual things. And it is at this time that the Lord reveals himself to Abraham. And he reaffirms the covenant. And then later on, Abraham also takes this opportunity, now that he knows he's with the Lord, capital L. And the text changes. The beginning of the text, Lord is lowercase, and then partway through after this revelation, it's uppercase L. And he takes this opportunity to petition the Lord for Sodom, because he knew what was going on down there. He knew what kind of people those were. He probably didn't know about the specific event that was going on with Lot, or that was going to happen with Lot, but he knew that Sodom was a place that needed Christ, or that needed the Lord and needed the message of God. And so he begins to pray for Sodom's protection. And so what we see, I believe, is a pattern here. I believe that we see Abraham's practice, Abraham's custom. Is that Abraham, received people into his home, and then the conversation would naturally drift towards spiritual things. And I believe that not just because of what happened in this specific instance, but also because of the nature of who Abraham was and the covenant that he had with God. Remember the covenant that Abraham had? God had some responsibility, and then Abraham had some responsibility in the covenant. And Abraham's responsibility was to be a light to the nations. And I believe that Abraham took that responsibility very seriously. And so when he saw the strangers off at a distance, he ran to them. That's why he ran to them. That's why he demonstrated kindness and grace, because he saw it as his responsibility as one who now represents God. I represent God. I am associated with him. Therefore, I must be a person of peace. I must be a person of generosity. I must be a person of kindness and grace as I represent my God. Furthermore, Abraham understood his responsibility to be a light to the nations, to also proclaim the greatness and love of God. And so I believe again, which is why this conversation steers towards spiritual things. I believe it was a very natural part of who Abraham was because of who he was and his relationship with God. It's just something that he did, and I believe this was a common practice around Abraham's table. He just didn't show people hospitality and kindness for the sake of showing hospitality and kindness, although I believe there was a part of that that was kind and humanitarian. But I believe that in Abraham's heart, he believed that the best possible thing that he could do with his guests is to share the good news of the God that he had found. And so, for Abraham, it's the most natural thing in the world. Which is why I believe that Abraham's witness and hospitality have endured over the centuries and millennia as a person of tremendous hospitality. Because Abraham saw hospitality as an opportunity. I believe that Jesus also saw hospitality as an opportunity. Some of his best ministry, took place in homes and around tables, not that much different from yours. The encouragement of Mary and Martha, proclaiming the straight-up gospel to get Zacchaeus, the healing of Peter's mother-in-law, the raising of Jairus' daughter. And who knows what cool and really exciting ministry took place with all those sinners and tax collectors and those times that Jesus sat with them and ate with them. There is no opportunity to connect and share like the opportunity that comes when we share a meal together, face to face, eye to eye, heart to heart, smile to smile. Perhaps the most well-known and respected Christian scholar and philosopher and thinker and author of his time was a man by the name of Francis Schaeffer. And during his life, he was also well known for his hospitality because he and his wife Edith ran a home of Christian hospitality in Switzerland known as L'Abri. And over the years, Dr. Schaeffer and his wife welcomed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people as he opened their home and their hearts to these people. And when he was alive, Dr. Schaeffer had written some of the most profound theological books, philosophical books of the 20th century. But again, he and his wife were probably the most well-known for their hospitality. Scholars mostly, and thinkers, and people who asked the big questions would come into their home seeking answers and truth. And they would stay sometimes for a few days, sometimes for a few weeks, and there's stories of people coming and just living with them for months and sometimes even longer. And there they would study and they would have conversations on the back patio and in the wonderful garden, or in the wintertime at the hearth when the snow was all around the windows. And they would speak of deep things and they would speak of the things of God. And countless individuals came into that wonderful house confused. People of all philosophies and religions and backgrounds. And they would leave Christian because of the wonderful hospitality that they had been shown and the nature of that hospitality and how it was directed. And because of that, some of the finest minds of the 20th century had come to know Christ. And who knows the fruit these influential people shared, all because Dr. Schaeffer understood the power of hospitality. His wife Edith had a saying that every Christian home ought to have a door that swings open in welcome. And they understood that ministry had a power that was equivalent to all of the books and all of the thinking and all of the wonderful thoughts that Dr. Schaeffer had and had experienced. But that their real ministry was investing in people and lives as they took them in hospitality and changed them through their kindness. God used that in their lives to draw people to Him. And again, who knows what fruit they bore through all of that. I say all of that to challenge us, to challenge me, to be a people of hospitality. Last week, I spent a good bit of time just talking about the preponderance of material in the Scripture that talks about hospitality. I was having a conversation with Pastor George this morning about that very thing, and he had gone to a conference about missionary practices in places like India and other parts of the developing world, and they were talking about how hospitality has become the most powerful way that they have to connect with people. Because I'm telling you right now that even though our culture is increasingly disconnected and it seems that community is becoming, less and less a part of our society, I believe that people hunger for that. I believe that people desire that, and they need someone to show them the way to true Christian hospitality. And that as we connect with people, it will give us an opportunity to share the story and the message of our God. And they will see the living Christ in us. And that through that witness, as we invest in others, again, you may not even have a home. You may be a student, and your home is not your own. Again, it's an attitude. It's a lifestyle of making people feel welcome, wanted, special, important, safe, and included. And we can all do that wherever we are. And we can do it in the name of Christ. And you never know what fruit is going to come from that. Hospitality needs to be a mark of the character of God's people. And may it be a mark in my life, and may it be a mark in your lives as well.